The seasons were changing. The nights were longer, and naturally, the days shorter. It was the season when evil claimed the land. Human dominance gave way to Zaran control. Darkness was dangerous, even in other seasons, but in this season especially. Even so, a lone figure remained on a knoll, a grassy hill that was the unsaid boundary of the country of man. It was from there to the sea, a scant 3 miles to the west, that was the only, quote, safe place on this continent. It was called safe, but one still had to keep their guard up. The lone figure was seated at the top, looking at the setting sun, appearing for all the world as a statue, cloaked in a brown robe. Under the robe was a relatively handsome teen. A 5'9½", he was nearly the tallest person in town. His short brown hair, parted to the left, matched his robe. His eyes were of a darker brown. He had been there for hours. Ever since his powers started to manifest themselves, he felt that something was going to happen, and soon. But whenever he tried to isolate this feeling, it disappeared like mist of dry ice. All his friends said he was imagining things, but he still could not shake this feeling. He had stayed out later and later trying to comprehend these feelings, that he was going to make the biggest impact since the time of Merlin. Although all thought that, didn't they? On the north side of this knoll was the forest that reached nearly to the top. The hues of autumn were on their way to taking over the forest, but summer still held the upper hand. It was from this area that a voice hissed to the figure. "You're out awfully late, aren't you, Edmund?" It was the 3rd time this week he had been caught almost past curfew, but this didn't bother him. In response to the accusation, Edmund calmly stated, "And you're out a little early, aren't you, Draz?" Draz was a czar, the alleged evil version of man. The problem with calling one evil and the other good is that ideals can shift subtly between good and evil, shades of gray. For this reason, both humans and Czars were closely guarded watched by the others. Draz was a little taller than Edmund. He was very thin, though was not a skeleton. He wore his black hair tied and braided in black, like an English infantryman, and his eyes were a fuchsia red. Not that uncommon in Czars. Some say that if you look closely, you can see how ancient humans thought of them as having fangs and being undead of the night. "And it's our season," called Draz. Cool as ice, Edmund responded as he got up and turned to the voice. "Not for another 3 days, it's not. Someone has not yet upon us." It was a transitory season. The chill in the air was not bone-shattering, but it was close enough. The changing of the seasons served to remind Edmund that all things had cycles. The universe was constantly in motion, but though he understood this on an intellectual level, he was barely into high school and still had the mentality of a teenager. Book smart but moody, not a good combination, especially when coupled with unrivaled power. Even at his full height, he did not match that of the Zaran, but even with that in Draz's favor, anyone could tell that Edmund was the clear superior. "This is our land. The human dominance is only in other lands. We put up with you because the others keeps others out." Still as cool as can be, Edmund stated, "And we thank you for that." Suddenly mad, Draz called out, "Your thanks is neither wanted nor is it welcomed. You keep to your land and we may let you live." They were long-time adversaries. They neither hated nor loved each other. They only used each other as a measuring stick for their own advancement. Draz felt that he was on the losing side. For this reason, he despised the other. "Temper, temper," Edmund started, mocking the mock shock evidence. What's that? Watch that blood pressure. Even a heartless beast need to be healthy. Human! Finally fed up with Draz's prodding, Edmund put his foot down. Zarin, I could easily cast a light spell on you so fast you'd be wishing you'd stayed in tonight. Edmund would not really do this, however, for he did not know the spell. For another reason, acting in aggression for no real reason was a sure path to the evil. There was two major forces in this world, as all knew, the path of light and the path of evil. Not to say there weren't shades of gray, but one inevitably drifted to one pole or the other. Draz did not know of this, but knowing he could not stand in a fight, he conceded. Just make sure you're in before the night falls. The others aren't as playful as I. Draz turned to leave. Edmund called back. I plan to. By the way, I will not be here after tomorrow. The testers from Trollrun's Wall will be here in the morning to decide where I will attend class. They will make your nightly duty a little easier, won't it? Without response, Draz stalked into the night. The Zarans had to keep a balance, keeping humans afraid enough to stay at bay, but not quite so much that others came to take care of those that would do harm to their kin. Thus, the nightly duty Edmund was talking of. Those low on the hierarchy would make the rounds in near twilight to find weary souls to either save or punish. They had told humans that they would not kill them so long as they were indoors at dusk, yet for the most part they only gave stern warnings and painful punishments. The only time they really endorsed their death penalty was during their sacred season, the time when live sacrifices had to be made of all trespassers. They did not have to kill at other times, though did, even if just so to keep the humans unaware of the sacrifices. As for Tralldans, it was a school of magic, a very prestigious boarding school where those with power could study in safety. But there were others, in different areas. You were sent to a certain school based on where it was felt you would do best. It had been learned long ago that different people thrive in different environments. These tests were designed to show which environment a student would thrive in, whether it was an Arctic tundra, a rainforest, or anything in between. That was all that really mattered. This, like all schools in the ways of magic, was in the fantasy realm, a place known for magic. As a rule, a representative from any four of the races of power tested one with a hint of power. If there was not a place for them in that school, they would be referred to another. The main reasons for the test, though, was not in the system know about. It was so they could find signs of evil, know the darkest of powers. Those that had the seed of evil had to be taken extreme care of, so the evil did not grow and cause a mess of things. This was an ill time for the evil to surface again, if there ever was a bad time. There were less and less people with the ability, and so it would be difficult to hold off the evil, if it did make an appearance. Draz watched Edmund leave with disgust. For a moment he wished he could stand light. As soon as he realized he was thought this, he dismissed it. Darkness in Zarin lore was the place of the gods, and those that could stand the light had some sort of debt to pay to the gods. He thought Edmund put the hope of light in his head, and so he hated the druid even more. He left to find easier victims, and Edmund went the short distance to his home. Edmund was not just a human. As said, he was a druid, or a human with the power to use magic. Not just any human with the ability to light a fire with his thoughts was considered a druid, though. They had to have some type of control and do more than a few parlor tricks. As is well known, all races have groups within them that can use magic. Elves had the Maves, Dwarves had the Midrons, Aquals had Quells, Mermen and Merins, etc. But, like so many things, some of the power had been amplified by the word of mouth, and some were held in better regard than others. Such is the case with the elves. many thinking all of them had power. For a long time, natural humans did indeed think all elves had power. In fact, it was about the same percentage as humans, though. A great many things have happened in that way, and for that reason you have to use a fine-tooth comb to find real truth in the epics and histories. You also have to hear it from both sides to find out what really happened, and even then it's hard to tell. Each race had different methods of using power, and different levels that could be attained. All were different, but all were great. A prospective druid was always considered a mage until they proved they were more, in which case they could be given a different title, as with all species. Usually one would get to the second or third level within a year, and that is nothing special, but all, until they learned otherwise, think of themselves as wizards or warlocks, which were about the 5th level. Those that don't believe themselves powerful usually have the potential to go far further than others, though. This is because they understand things on a different level than others. All of this went through Edmund's head for the millionth time, since he was informed that he would be tested to enter a school. He only knew what others his age knew, possibly less, growing up in the true or mortal realm. But it was still a bit of a load. Edmund was not in a hurry, but he did arrive at the edge of his town far sooner than he thought he would. The town was built in a circle, 4 main roads marking cardinal directions, converged in the center of concentric circles radiating from a central plaza. In the east, the road melded into the wharf and the area took on the feel of a harbor, while the rest of the town was a small inland village. Minor roads and paths connected rings in random fashion, as if to destroy uniformity but maintain order. He passed the furthest ring, which was surrounded by fields of grain and vegetables. They were a small community and competed on the global market by having the biggest veggies and richest grain in the hemisphere. All other food was shipped in about weekly. Luckily, they did not have to rely on merchants to bring news like in the past. They were all connected live via satellite to the world of knowledge. He was unsurprised at the fact that, other than lights and random residences, his hometown resembled a ghost town. This community had never known a nightlife. Even the local tavern closed its doors at dusk. But he was on the edge of the streets, and through the windows, he saw people gape at the fact he was stupid enough to be out this late. He arrived at his door about 6 minutes after he crossed the city limits, though it usually took him a good 10. He figured later that he was drawn by his mother, who worried about him and his blossoming power. He was, after all, the first in his line to display any sort of ability with magic at all, and he was decent in his abilities. Usually, this meant the evil had already been seated in his abilities. Usually, but not so in Esmond's case, he hoped. His great step-uncle had power, and he mostly made sendis, often called seeing stones or crystal balls, but that was the extent of past power in his family, or at least that he knew of. His house was not that special on the outside, just a small cottage with a thatch roof and whitewashed plaster framed by dark wood. On the inside, it was very cozy. There was a see-through fireplace between the kitchen and the family room, indoor plumbing with warm and cold running water, and 3 guest rooms, each connected to the central heating and air system. Electricity was not as foreign as one would think by the look of the town. All had it. Solar panels were used for this energy, so no plant was needed. This was a simple community that harbored no ill will towards anything. It was like peace would never leave it. Why did none of this comfort him, though? As he walked through the simple machined doorway, a look of great relief flooded his mother's face. His mother was a medium-sized woman with auburn hair and blue eyes. She had been living in great human cities of Turndale, Birmingham, Vegas, Tokyo, or any others one could think of. But her lifelong raising 2 children alone showed. In some cases, however, such as wine, it gets better with age. So too was it with Edmund's mother. Edmund, she exclaimed as she embraced him. Where were you? You know the Zars get adamant about curfew at this time of year? Trying to ease his mother's worries, Edmund replied as he emerged from the bear hut. I'm fine. It was just the graying knoll. You know Droz is always there to warn those that are late. Under her breath, his mother said, He's not warning you, Edmund. Aloud, she said, You know how I worry. You may have the power, but you should still be careful. Untrained, it would be easy for any Graydon to kill you, and you also have more susceptible to evil. I know, and you should trust me more than anything to do anything stupid. You taught me too well. I am bound to get accepted to a good school tomorrow. I'll have the training to stay on the good side of light, and in all her worrying, she really didn't think the evil had gotten a hold of him, but she just had to be careful. The evil was a dangerous thing, even if it had been mostly dormant for 10,000 years. If ever a seed of evil germinated, especially in a human, the power of darkness could grow erratically. The power would soon be too much for any of species to control. It would then twist and warp the mind. The wielder of such power would become cruel, an evil individual, and the power would just balloon. If allowed to proceed at the evil's whim, then soon it would be far too great for any of the good, no matter how powerful, to counteract. That begins a time of darkness, and it takes multiple warlocks, combining their powers to overthrow that kind of new Dark Lord. The problem at this time is few get to the highest ranks of power, gravely when it comes to magic. That is why even when one has the seed of evil, it's not turned away like in the high time of magic. They are sent to special schools to learn how to control the dark impulses, though the first few years they are not told of the implications or their needs. That could catapult them to evil far faster than they would on their own, it is thought. Over time, they do learn for themselves of their particular problem and how to control it. Edmund, his mother, helped him prepare their meal and waited for his sister to finish her homework. She had just started junior high 2 years earlier, and it was doing decent, but she still needed prodding to excel. With all seated at the dining table, they then ate dinner. His dad had long been lost in a battle with a host of orcs in a fantastic realm that had taken the hold of Mithir, and all able people had been called to arms in all the realms of combat to combat that threat. When his father was killed, the other residents of the town built them their dining room annex. One fort may not sound like a reason to call to arms, but there are powers that some cannot comprehend. The reason it was such a big threat was that it contained what is called a sharn, or an item of great power. This was not as powerful as one of the mystic Sharn of Asherah, but no one wants to have any Sharn in the possession of evil. If any of the evil forces got hold of a Sharn, it would be as bad as a dark time caused by a powerful, dark, ancient magic, but would last far longer. As the family ate their meal, they discussed their day, and afterwards Edmund excused himself, took a shower, and went to bed. He wanted to be fresh for the testing tomorrow. As for his sister, tomorrow was Saturday, so she stayed up late and watched movies while her mom knitted a scarf. As Edmund slept, he dreamt about what the fantastic realm would be like. He knew, like many others, that the fantastic realm was where what were referred to in the true realm as mythic beasts resided. It was also the only place dragons would call home. Unlike other species, dragons, Edmund was told, could not travel between the realms, but by far his biggest joy was the thought of getting to meet a diacon. All he really knew of the other realms was that it was the easiest way to get between them was to use an agrial, or natural portal. An agrial looked much like a carved pillar, sometimes in the shape middle of nowhere. He had heard tales of a hinge in a place called Europe, where druids had built an artificial agrial, but none could get it to work. All his questions would be answered in short order. He just had to pass the test in the morning. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed our amazing tale. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe for more great adventures from the Polyverse.